Welcome to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. Hello, everyone. Roe versus Wade was a landmark decision of the United States Supreme Court in 1973. The court ruled that the Constitution of the United States protects a pregnant woman's liberty to choose to have an abortion without excessive government restriction. 48 years later, that fight for a woman's right continues, and as advocates fight for Black women and abortion rights, others see this battle as a tragedy for the Black community. So let's get down to business. The business of being Black today is pro-life versus pro-choice. Please welcome pro-life advocates Marie Stroughter. Hi, Marie.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Pastor Brian Walker. Hi, Pastor Brian.
How are you? Good to be here.
OBGYN, Dr. Juanita Mestre Dudley. Hi, Dr. Mestre Dudley.
Hi, good afternoon.
And host of the Only Vibes podcast, Brian Pira. I got you.
Yeah, you did it right. What's up? What's up, Miss Tammi Mack? Glad to be here.
I'm so happy that you are here. So let's kick off the show with the traditional question, which is why should Black people care? Why should Black people care about abortion rights? Dr. Mestre Dudley.
Well, once again, thanks for having me. But Black people should care about abortion rights because it affects us the most. Why does it affect us the most? It's because already Black women are 3 times higher to die in birth than their white counterparts. So why should abortion rights affect us? Because it's a woman's choice to have an abortion or terminate her pregnancy if it's also going to affect her life. And that affects us as Black women. Also because, one, we have a lot of comorbid conditions. We have diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease that affects us. And along with the pregnancy that was possibly unplanned, or even if she did plan it, it could put her life at risk and increase her mortality immensely. So that is why Black women should care about this. Not to mention a lot of Black women live in low socioeconomic areas and will not have the ability to go other places to get their abortion if they do need it. You know, I'm fortunate. I live in New York. It's possible to get an abortion when you need it. But when you go to Texas now with the new abortion laws and you can't afford to get your abortion there, you're going to have to travel. If you don't have the money to do it, you're not going to be able to travel. And then that will affect you. Again, affect our Black women.
Pastor Brian.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I think it'll affect why we should care about it is because abortion eliminates a human life in general and also eliminates a Black life. And the good doctor is correct that Black women have a higher rate of having abortions than whites. And blackgenocide.org has a good abortion counters for that. Also, I've been doing post-abortion counseling with my wife for over 15 years, counseled hundreds of women, and the impact emotionally, spiritually, and also physically on Black women is something that we need to take into account. And also the connection of abortion and breast cancer. A good film on that is Hush, Hush, a pro-choice Canadian woman out of Canada. And she did some research on the connection between abortion and breast cancer. And these are all kind of health concerns that I feel that make it really important that we consider this.
Marie, why should Black people care?
Well, I think if you look at us societally, Black people are at 14% of the population. If you look at the fertility replacement rate, I think we need 2.1 births per person, and we're at 1.8. So we are losing by attrition. We should have more of us. And I think if you look at the racial implications of abortion, Margaret Sanger's Negro Project, where we were labeled undesirables and human weeds. And the whole purpose behind what she did was to eradicate the human weeds and undesirables. And so when you do see, as Dr. Mestre Dudley said, these communities where abortion clinics are there, it should not be a surprise to anyone that they are in communities of color, because that's by design.
Brian, why should Black people care? Why should we care?
Well, we should care, and I'll tell you why. But before I do that, I would like to do a quick disclaimer. I want to talk about how, if in this conversation, I mentioned childbearing people. I'm talking about anyone who is gender nonconforming and also trans, particularly trans men who can still bear children. So if I mention them in the conversation, or I mentioned that term, that's where I'm coming from, which also encompasses women identifying people who can bear children. Now, why should Black women care? I think Dr. MESTRE Dudley was absolutely correct. You know, we have to talk about first of all, the dramatic healthcare disparities that exist between Black and white people in America, number one, and how that is directly tied and connected to the Black maternal mortality rates. I mean, if you look at the statistics longitudinally, and that's where I like to go to, you look at 1988 to 1994, you have 7 years that was research that was done in New York. Women who were giving birth, the mortality rate of women giving birth between whites and Blacks was 7.1 whites, 39.5 for Black, which means that is a 5.96 times higher rate of birth of women mortality while giving birth. So if we look at those statistics, we understand that it's very important for Black people, because Black people are dying, Black women are dying who are giving birth. And so when we talk about Black Lives Matter, it's very important that we encompass the women who are currently existing and living on this planet. Oftentimes we hear pro-life and pro-life arguments contend with the fact that we need to protect the baby or the offspring or what's in the womb or hasn't even developed yet, because some people talk about it at conception. But we have to talk about the women, the Black women who exist on this planet, who you are trying to strip, right, their agency from choosing, right? So we have to talk about it. We have to talk about it holistically.
Yeah, and as Dr. Mestre Dudley said, Black women, not only the infant or the child, but Black women are dying at a higher rate, an alarmingly higher rate than white women when it comes to childbirth. And we have to take that into consideration when we consider and have a discussion about abortion. So I want to know personally your stance on pro-life versus pro-choice. Marie?
I am pro-life. I am the biological mother of one, and I am the adoptive mother of two. So I definitely believe in life. And I think you said that about the mortality rate of mothers, but there are women who die having abortions also. And so I think you're talking about the mortality rate there as well. And the ability to, when women are in clinics, such as we saw with Kermit Gosnell, there were unsanitary practices. There were women who died at the hands of having the abortion. So I think you can look at both sides and look at what is medically necessary when we talk about a medically necessary abortion, the life of the mother. I think it's less than one, I think it's like 1,000 a year out of total abortions performed. So, yeah.
Pastor Brian, your stance.
I'm pro-life, sanctity of life from womb to tomb, and also concur in a way with what we is also referred to as the seamless garment argument about pro-choice, that we need to take into account the needs of the woman. And I think the pro-life movement has done very well at that. Here in the Twin Cities, we have I hand out a blue sheet in front of abortion facilities and give women and men alternatives to that. My wife and I went down that road over 40 years ago in New York City. So I know the effect of it very well. Living with her for 41 years, been married, and also the effect of it on me as a man. And so we have, yes, there may be health disparities, but I don't think that cutting our population, cutting our birth rates is the answer to health disparities. And I do not view abortion as as healthcare. And it might work well for one person going into the facility, but it doesn't work very well for the child that is left in the facility. I think there's a better way. We have a lot of help for women. We have a homeless shelter for pregnant women. We also have a health clinic. It has a sliding fee, no fee, and also all kind of health care. So I think that the seamless garment is being carried very well with the pro-life movement.
And I've always had an issue with pro-life, pro-choice, because pro-life suggests that those that are pro-choice are anti-life. And I just don't believe that that is the case. Dr. Mestre Dudley.
Oh, I've been biting at the bits to talk about this.
I saw it. I saw it all in
That
your
was
face.
what I was just about to say. I am pro-choice, which means that I believe in a woman's right to make a decision with her physician and her family, if she chooses, to decide what to do with her body. Before that fetus comes out, it is her body. That fetus cannot live without that mother. And you want to talk about health disparities and such. People who are pro-choice are not necessarily not pro-life. I just believe that it's the mother's right to choose. I have a patient right now who wants her kid so badly. She spent a lot of money on IVF to get a baby. She got a donor egg and had an embryo implanted. And we had to tell her that at 20 weeks, when she got her anatomy scan, that the baby has so many anomalies that now that she has to make this decision whether or not she wants to have this baby who's going to, eventually put a burden on her. Can you hear me? Did I go off?
We hear you.
Okay. That's going to put a burden on her financially, because when you have a child with multiple anomalies, not to mention if it survives, you're going to be in the hospital. It has heart anomalies, which means you're going to need surgery. She cannot take that on. And that's a decision she has to make with her family right now about a baby that she definitely wants, that she is going to possibly terminate this pregnancy. So it's not a light choice. It's not like, oh, I just don't want my baby and I'm just going to have an abortion. That is so not what pro-choice it's about. It's about making these decisions. And sometimes it's a hard decision. It's not everyone that goes in there that don't want their child. There's women. I have another patient.
Let's take a quick break before we get to that patient, Dr. Mestre Dudley, and we'll come right back on The Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. Hello. The Business of Being Black today is pro-life versus pro-choice. Please welcome host of the Only Vibes podcast, Brian Pirapakaran, pro-life advocates Marie Stroughter, and Pastor Brian Walker. OBGYN Dr. JUANITA Mestre Dudley is with us as well. Hello, everyone. We were talking to Dr. Mestre Dudley about one of her clients, or her patients rather. We're going to get back to you on that. I first want to know where Brian stands.
In terms of the pro-choice, pro-life, I want to let you know, Ms. Tammi Mack, I am pro-choice, and my pro-choice is very universal, which means I support pro-life individuals to make that decision for themselves. And I also support the right for all childbearing people to decide whether they want to bring a child to term or not, considering their own current financial, emotional, and mental preparedness. And we also want to protect them from, obviously, the dangers that come with pregnancy and bringing a child to term. We also want to talk about the cases of rape and incest, which I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show. But those statistics are very important to discuss. And I think it's very important because there was certain things that were brought up. So tying that into kind of my stance of pro-choice, pro-life. Some people on the panel discussed that they're pro-life all the way around. I think it was Pastor Brian Walker. And I think one of the things that I really grapple with is how is it that we can be pro-life, and what type of life is it when we are removing and stripping the agency of women or childbearing persons to make the decision for themselves with their physicians, their family members, their spouse, etc., to make those decisions for themselves. Like, I don't know how pro-life that could be. And I also want to make mention of the Margaret Sanger point that Marie brought up, right? Margaret Sanger, yes, did definitely have some problems, right, that we have to definitely discuss. And I think it's very important. But we also have to discuss how Planned Parenthood currently, in many spaces, particularly Black and brown communities that are predominant, we don't have clinics for people to have STD and STI testing. We don't have clinics that are actually readily available for breast cancer and cancer screenings, right, and other different services that they provide. So we want to talk about those statistics as well, because I have them ready at the ready. But 4% or 3% of abortions that are actually done through Planned Parenthood is a very small number in percentage. If you guys want to just talk about how they want to eradicate the Black population, it's just not true, not statistically significant, not in 2021.
Let's talk about a woman's right. A woman's right to choose. Do you believe that women should have control over their bodies, Pastor Brian?
I, excuse me, I believe women should have control over their bodies, but also not at the expense of another life. I say that as a pastor and looking from a Christian worldview, to be very frank with you, but also counseling women over about a 15-year span. Many of them are post-abortive, multiple abortions. Some had abortions before 1973, and they truly regret it. And all these decisions came in league with their doctor. And so also another thing that we need to talk about and hope we talk about is that there's a great move away from abortion in brick and mortar facilities to abortion fields. I frankly call that a DIY abortion, where women are giving a regimen of pills to go home and abort their own child, similar to a miscarriage, which I was present for in my apartment in the Bronx, and my wife had hers. So these type of things, I think, will have great impact emotionally on Black women, and also Black men that may be present or may not be present, because this is in reality a taking of a life. And also, as far as choice, I think that it needs to be an informed one. Many women do not know the full range of gestation development, the physical effect, the link between abortion and breast cancer. I really encourage people to look at the movie Hush. Again, great research. Also, there's a workbook that comes with it that makes the case for abortion and breast cancer. And Black women have a more aggressive form of breast cancer than white women do.
Dr. MESTRE Dudley.
Yes. Back to a woman's right to choose. I'm sorry that I know you counsel women about, the regret. Yes, regret is high for a lot of women, but a woman who is properly counseled by her doctor, and she comes and she makes that choice after having, first of all, when I counsel anyone, they are given all their options. I don't come in saying, hey, do you want to have an abortion? That's not how an OBGYN works, because I'm in the business of delivering babies. I'm sorry. But if a woman comes to me and says, doctor, I don't think I can have this baby, and it's many reasons. Sometimes she wanted this baby, but now she lost her job and she cannot support this child. She should have that right to choose, because otherwise then we're talking about her mental health in the future. And then if you want to look at it, what about the child who's grown up in a home where the mother cannot provide for that child? And then they get put into like the foster system and so forth. Yes, I do believe in adoption, but a lot of babies don't get to the adoption phase, especially if, the woman's body cannot handle the pregnancy. And I really do hate the term termination. We like to call it pregnancy interruption, because sometimes we're interrupting the pregnancy for a reason. You have patients who just cannot carry a pregnancy. You have women who have a child at home, but yet still the second pregnancy that she wanted is making her so sick to the point she can't go to work, she can't take care of her other kid. And she makes that decision that in order to be a good mother to my other child, this pregnancy cannot continue. That should be her right with her doctor and her family. We have turned, this decision about women's bodies into everybody's decision, and it should not be. It's a private matter between a patient, her family, and sometimes she doesn't include her family. You know how many patients don't tell their family because it is something that they did not want to do, but they felt that it was right at that time for them. And I don't think that we should burden them with the thought about the fact that they're killing a life when this life cannot live on its own at a certain point. This is why it is very important that women do get proper teaching and counseling.
And Dr. Mestre, if I can cut in there, I would like to also add to that, if we look at the informed consent laws, particularly in red states where all these, all this litigation is happening, we really understand and in practice see that a lot of this counseling that happens, particularly in these states, is really wants to discourage people from actually making a decision. It's not really about informed consent, right? When we say informed consent is giving people the proper tools, the proper informational packets to review to make sure that they have the necessary knowledge to make sure that they are making the right decision. In many states, particularly the ones that I studied when I was in college, if you look at it, people have to travel far, far distances because a lot of their clinics in their communities are closed, right? Which is the importance of Planned Parenthood and its accessibility. But if we want to talk about those clinics that are closed, because there's so many restrictions that are placed on them People have to travel far distances. Now this person who's from low socioeconomic statuses, don't have the necessary resources, don't have the job, don't have the necessary paid time off, have to take time out of their schedules to book a hotel, travel to a different place that's far from home, and then go into a clinic. Informed consent laws state not only do they have to get that packet, they may have to take about 4 or 5, maybe a week to even review that packet before making a decision. That's time to travel back home, book another hotel on their way back, and then make the decision to actually have. So we want to be intellectually honest about this conversation and understand that when we're talking about counseling, we're talking about counseling, and sometimes it's not the real counseling. It's not the one that you're having with your physician and getting the proper necessary tools.
But I think if you're talking about being intellectually honest, we have to talk about the fact that, we're talking about cases where children have developmental issues. We're in this discussion so far, we've talked about, I think it's a euphemism to say pregnancy interruption, because it really is terminating a pregnancy. The pregnancy is not continuing. It is a termination. So I think we're doing semantics here, but the fact of the matter is, statistically, how often is it needed to be interrupted because there is a problem with the child? And even then, there are ministries and there are organizations that support the medical bills, all of the bills that are associated with having a child that have these developmental issues. Dr. MESTRE Dudley talked about a client that she had that wants her child and has tried IVF. I also know of people who have tried for years and years and years and years and would love the opportunity to adopt a child, disabilities or no disabilities. And I've mentioned that I'm an adoptive mother of 2. I adopted older children who did have issues. So when you're talking in the pro-life community, there are people who will step up to the plate also.
Let's take a quick break. Come right back on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on FOXSOUL. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack, and the business of being Black today is pro-life versus pro-choice. So should there be restrictions to who should and shouldn't be able to get an abortion? Pastor Walker.
There are already restrictions on that, and they're rather loose. I think we need to revisit not only Roe Wade, but also the companion piece that was passed the same day, Doe v. Bolton. And Doe v. Bolton pretty much said that under the umbrella of the health of the mother, that could range from everything from economic distress to emotional problems to physical problems. And so Doe v. Bolton really opened the window wide open for women to have an abortion pretty much for any reason. I live in the state of Minnesota. You can have an abortion here up to 9 months. It's just a matter of finding a physician that's willing to do it and have the facilities and the insurance to be able to do it.
Pastor Walker, I'm not sure that can happen, but I'm no doctor. Doctor, please.
No.
A 9-month abortion.
You cannot have an abortion at 9 months. That's a full-blown baby. That's definitely not possible. And you won't find anybody that does that.
I'm saying that is legal. I'm saying that is legal. And no, I praise God, and a lot of people will not do that. But
it's not legal.
Why is 15 months wrong? I mean, 15 weeks wrong, which is the case down in with the Dobbs case. So if a 9-month is wrong, what makes a 15-month wrong or a 9-week wrong? So, where do we draw the line, or where do we start the line?
Where do we draw the line, Dr. MESTRE Dudley?
Line is drawn at viability. And I'm sorry, at 19 weeks, that fetus cannot survive outside of the body. And we counsel patients on that. We have a 22-weeker who is ruptured right now, and we're allowing her. And when she delivers, there's nothing we can do for this baby. This baby is going to pass because it cannot survive at 19 weeks. It is not possible. Okay, I know we're dropping the viability lines and we're doing great now. We have 23 weekers, but everyone needs to look at it. It's not all about quantity of life. It's all about quality of life. A 23 weeker versus a full-term 37 weeker is a very different baby. The longer a baby is in is the better a baby does because all the organs are developed. So no, 19 weeks is very different from a full-term baby, and
maybe we could agree on that. There is a point where an abortion should be illegal. If you're talking 37
already
weeks,
is. Even in the state of New York. don't mean to cut you, but in the state of New York, it's 24. And I think they might even drop it a little lower to 23 because now we can do resuscitative measures at 23 weeks. But there is a limit unless there is mitigating circumstances. There was a 27-weeker, but there were no organs. So, I mean, it made no sense for the female for the mother to carry it to full term and deliver a baby with no organs. That made no sense.
When you say no organs,
like the organs did not develop. The brain was missing. There were missing organs. So the fetus would have been incompatible with life. So she opted for a termination, but she also had to go all the way to Maryland to get it because it was the only place that would do a termination at 27 weeks, even though the fetus was not viable.
Marie, how do you feel about that? There were no organs, she says. The fetus was not viable. Should she have still come to term with the pregnancy?
I think that we're talking about a statistically small group of people out of the millions of abortions that are performed annually. So we're having a very theoretical discussion about the absolute worst cases, right? Millions and millions of airplanes take off every day, and we only hear about the planes that crash. And when we have these types of discussions, we talk about the children that have no organs, and we talk about all of the absolute worst cases, but these don't represent the abortions that occur every single day in this country.
Well,
and so I think that we're talking about some, but I'm saying when the life of the mother is at stake, as I said, it's like a 1,000 a year out of all the millions of abortions. So I think that we need to separate what is medically necessary and have that discussion. But we're talking about in general. And so I think many of the abortions that we're talking about. And Brian brought up the fact that there are no clinics where people can have these abortions and things like that. There are free clinics in every single city that do pap smears, that do that offer contraceptives, that have all of these things. Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics that are specifically for the purpose of having an abortion we're talking about that's their product.
No,
and so you can go to your doctor's office, my OBGYN, and I can get contraceptives if I need them. Of course, that train's left. I'm old, but we're talking about when that train was still on the tracks. I could go to my OBGYN. So
go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, Marie. Well, unfortunately, I think what you're referring to is very anecdotal pieces of evidence, meaning your own lived experience. That is not statistically true. And I think when you try to use that to project it into what's really going on in a national sense, you do it in a big injustice. And this is the biggest argument that we have, right? When you talk about, and you made the distinction between complications with the child and where it is needed, what we should also be talking about where it's also needed in the maternal health, right? Where the health of the mother plays the factor.
1,000.
In 2019, 754 women were identified as having died of maternal causes in the United States compared with 658 in 2018. So actually the number—
Out of how many abortions?
Excuse me, I didn't interrupt you. So please, let me just finish this. 658 in 2018, 754 in 2019. And in 2019, the maternal mortality rate for Black women was 44 deaths per 100,000 live births. That's 2.5 times the rate for white women. So what I want you to understand is when you say out of how many, one is too many, Marie. And I want you to understand and I implore you to do the research so that we can become more learned and more erudite on this topic, because unfortunately what we then fall to is either straw man ad hominem arguments, or we talk about fallacious things that don't really matter in the national sense of this conversation. And it does it an injustice, particularly when, as we talk about on the Tammi Mack Show, it is very important to center how this is so important for our Black communities. I don't mean to really raise my voice, but it's very important. And if we're going to fight for Black Lives Matter, it's important that we talk about Black Lives Mattering, particularly the ones that are in this waking world.
All Black lives.
Let me jump in. Planned Parenthood gets a really bad rap. It is not an abortion clinic. Abortion is a smidgen of what it does. It is actually where girls who don't have an OBGYN or have insurance can go to get their GYN, their STD testing, their mammograms done, and all their other things. Abortion is a small percentage. And I know that
is not.
your thing is
Dr.
that women should only have an abortion whether it affects their life. Well, when a woman comes to me and they're like, Dr. Mestre, I cannot go along with this pregnancy because I can't afford it, or I can't go along with this pregnancy because he left me and now I'm by myself, or I'm not mentally prepared for this pregnancy, or my family cannot handle this pregnancy. That is her right. She can also tell me, you know what? I don't want this pregnancy because I don't want this pregnancy. It is her body. Before that child comes there, it's her body. And I, as a protector and a caretaker of all women, I will be there to say, I am here for you. What do you need me to do? Let me give you these are your choice. You can have a baby. You could put the baby up for adoption. You can do this, that, then. These are your options. You can carry the baby. You can have an abortion.
Hold that thought, Dr. Mestre Dudley, because I saw Marie shaking her head when you talked about Planned Parenthood. Was there some disagreement there, Marie?
There is. I mean, there are people who have worked for Planned Parenthood. I'm thinking specifically of Abby Johnson in the movie Unplanned. She was a director of Planned Parenthood, and she says that nationally, the statistic that we're hearing about, only 3%. She said that there's like less than 1% of referrals for adoption. And so I think that these statistics, it's very nice to be able to provide them, but they're not accurate. And so,
can I rebut?
Yes.
I'm gonna let you finish. I'm sorry. I'm gonna let you finish. I don't want to interrupt you.
Go ahead, Marie.
I'm just saying that these are not accurate, that there is a product. If we're in a clinic, right? I believe it was Barack Obama that said that if a child survived an abortion, they could not receive medical attention. Why not? Why can't that child be adopted? There are people who want children. Why can that child not be surrendered? If you can surrender a child in a hospital, if you can surrender a child in a fire station, the safe haven laws, why can't you surrender a child in an abortion clinic?
Let's take a quick break. Come right back on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. The business of being Black today is abortions and how do they affect the Black community. Marie was saying your statistics were a little disingenuous, Brian.
Well, and it's unfortunate because again, I think it's very important when we go into any conversation. I'm a scholar practitioner, right? I put the scholar first, and I like to make sure that I do my research first. Let's talk about the statistics of Planned Parenthood in 2018 to 2019 year. 9.8 million services were provided. Now, when we say services, it's not just abortions. It's birth control, contraceptives in all forms. It's general health care. It's breast and pelvic exams, cancer screenings, STI, HIV testing and education, which is so important in the Black community, LGBTQ services, hormone therapy for trans people, etc. Right? So there's a long list of different resources and services that are provided. In 9.8 million of those services, 393,000 were abortion services, which equates to 4%. Now, if you want to say, oh, that's outdated, let's get a little closer. 2019 and 2020, 10,374,069 services, 354,871 abortions performed. That means that there was a decrease in abortions performed in Planned Parenthood, 1. And 2, that's 3% of those amount of cases that are actually abortions. So when we talk about it, what Planned Parenthood is actually doing, an overwhelming majority of it is 52% STI testing and treatment, and 25% of it is contraception, and everything else is a little bit minute in detail. So let's not get into the minutia. And I think it's very important that, again, we're intellectually honest as well as intellectually holistic about this approach.
Pastor Walker.
That's why I'm glad that you use the word services, because that is intellectually honest. When you say services, if I go to a clinic, I get tested for STDs, I get tested for HIV, I get tested, I have a mammogram, I have that. I am one person, but I receive many services. Yes. And so that is where the intellectual dishonesty occurs, because it sounds like, oh, we served this many clients, and so it's 3%. But it's those services offered to how many people? That's where the deception occurs.
And I'll give you the numbers. In 2018 to 2019, it was 2.4 million. In 2019 to 2020, it was 4 million. So, and when we say that, and when people, because people who are watching us, we want to be intellectually honest, the people who are watching us need to know this. People go recurringly to Planned Parenthood, right? You get tested every 3 months to get an STI testing. If you want to be a mature adult and you're being sexually active, that counts for one service per visit. So when we talk about it, you're absolutely correct. it's multiple services on one patient, but it's not that you're having 9.8 million abortions. You have to look at the facts. And I implore you to do so because it's very important, especially in these conversations where people lie on fallacious arguments.
Pastor Walker, what are the racial implications of abortion in the Black community?
Well, the racial implications is that our numbers are dropping. We don't have a replacement rate in terms of birth. And also, I think that I'm looking this as a pastor from a spiritual realm, whether you believe in Jesus Christ or not, or believe in any entity or not. I have to deal with them on the, for want of a better word, a receiving line. I'm not a pastor, a pulpit pastor. I don't pastor a church, but I do pastor a nonprofit that deals with post-abortion and miscarriage recovery. And this is the what I call the wake of abortion. And very few people want to talk about that. I'm not going to get into the weeds about the numbers. I do agree with the doctor how services are bundled and how that weighs the scales. But also we have to mention that the Department of Health and Human Services has what they call health centers. Findahealthcenter.gov, findahealthcenter.gov, way outnumber the number of Planned Parenthood facilities. And also they have sliding fee, no fee, and also healthcare through the usual places. So if Planned Parenthood tries to come off as that it's the only resource in town and they have the lion's share of healthcare in communities of color, that's not true. And so if you go to findahealthcenter.gov, you will see a map and much overwhelms the number of Planned Parenthood facilities within the Black community. And also I have to look at it from an emotional standpoint with the Black men that I get to talk to in front of these facilities. They realize that they are broken. They realize that they may have multiple partners and they've aborted maybe, we can get into the anecdotes. Everybody has an anecdote, but we haven't really touched on the number of people that have an abortion like I did. By not stepping up to the plate, I thought my financial position would improve by aborting my first child. It did not. In fact, emotionally and physically, my wife slid. Our relationship between each other. We talk about the so-called angry Black women. It did no good service to our marriage, which imploded almost for 17 years. And though the effect of that on the Black family, we want to talk about the economics. How about the economics of divorce, the economics of separation, the higher rate of divorce amongst aborted couples? And so we have to look at we want to look at the big picture. We have to look, including the life of the mother, the health of the mother, but also the health of the relationship between Black women and men as a result of having an abortion between themselves.
Well, to that point, those who have families and have chosen not to have abortions, we're still left with over 51% divorce rate, which dissolves the family anyway. But according to the article, Black Americans and Abortion, Black Americans have become more likely to support abortion rights over the past decade and more likely to support legal abortion in all circumstances. What do you think caused this shift? Was it a decrease of church attendance over time? Was it a political party identification with the Democrats and their position and stance on abortion rights? What do you think that was, Doctor?
I think that possibly there was a change because there are a lot more Black women out there who ended up, their Black men decided to leave. I'm not going to say that every Black relationship ends with the man leaving, but a lot of us women are having to take care of our kids by ourselves. I'm married, but that's what I see in my practice. First, they thought that they were about to have this meaningful relationship in this child, and it turned out that the partner didn't want it, and he gets to pick up and leave. But guess who gets stuck with the child? She does. So then she makes that decision whether or not she wants to carry this pregnancy. And once again, it should be her choice. Because while it's all fine and dandy that he has a choice in this sometimes, the point is he gets to pick up and leave at any point in time. And she is
Dr. Mestre Dudley, you make a good point. I want to talk to you about that, Marie. She makes a very good point when she says the man has a choice to deal with the baby or not. Why shouldn't the woman be able to have that same choice?
Well, first of all, I believe that we are talking about two bodies. Even though the child is housed within her body, it is still a separate entity, and if left alone, will be a separate entity. But I think to answer your question, a lot of women do not receive the support that they should, and adoption is not made economically viable. We are a Black family, and we adopted Black children. But I think that adoption needs to be made a more affordable option for families, because abortion is affordable and easy to obtain. But I know what we went through to adopt our two children, who, as I said, were older and had additional needs.
And let's face it too, though, Marie, if adoption was such a viable choice, and many people have adopted, I myself have been researching and thinking about adopting. But if adoption was that great, there would be no kids to adopt in America. But there are so many within that system. So are we really being honest with ourselves when we say, have the baby, if you don't want it, put it up for adoption, it's going to live a much better life?
Well, I think that we haven't done a good job with the messaging. I mean, there are organizations that will pay medical bills for pregnant women, that will take care of a pregnant woman, provide registries, provide a registry and provide diapers and all of those things after a child has been born. And we don't talk about those alternatives because, you have to carry the child for 9 months. And so that's inconvenient, or that's whatever it is. But there are organizations that will partner with you and walk with you and provide that support. As people have mentioned, sometimes women are alone and they don't have the emotional support, but there are organizations that are out there that are dedicated to those options. And so I think we haven't done a good messaging to talk about what alternatives are there, what for the client who had the IVF that wants this child.
Let's take a quick break and come right back on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Business of Being Black today, pro-choice versus pro-life. Please welcome host of the Only Vibes podcast, Brian Pirapakaran, pro-life advocates Marie STROUGHTER, and Pastor Brian Walker, OBGYN, Dr. Juanita MESTRE Dudley. Pastor Walker, I want to ask you real quick about this church thing. So has there been a decrease of church attendance over time? And perhaps that is a reason that's caused a shift in Black people supporting abortion rights?
There's been a decrease in church attendance domestically overall, but also steady than the wider white congregations. And so we are still church. I see it on the street when I talk to people in front of the abortion facilities. They have Black folks, we have like a baseline respect for clergy, for religion, for the church. And if there's a slide, I'm not quite sure what study or article you're referring to about more Blacks being more pro-choice than before. We've always had that informal adoption agency within our communities. Auntie, grandma has always stepped in. We also have extended family. I know families personally that have taken in children.
Absolutely.
Children with, that structure has been in the Black community.
Brian, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that it makes sense, right? It makes sense why Black people are now in an era of empowering themselves to fight back and to speak back on so many different issues that plague their lives. I mean, Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter Network, it fights for the rights for us, for all of us to be in a space where we're equal protections under the law, and that we have equal healthcare, and that we have equal in many different arenas. But I think it's very important because I want to go back to one of the arguments that was made, one of the questions, which is we don't have a replacement factor for Black children, and children are not being produced in such a big number. I think it's very important that we understand the reasons why people actually get abortions anyway. So the Guttmacher Institute in 2004 actually did a study that said that 74% of women having a baby would dramatically change their life, which is why they did not want to have the baby to term. 73% said can't afford a baby now. 48% don't want to be a single mother or having relationship problems. 38% said having completed my childbearing, meaning I don't want any more kids. 1% of them said that they were victims of rape, and 0.5% of them said results of incest. Now, it's very important cases of rape actually get misreported, underreported because of the shame that comes with that, particularly also when we talk about incest.
Absolutely.
So those numbers are not really statistically significant, but let's talk about that data. So when we're talking about how we actually have a big replacement factor, let's talk about how to improve the lives of Black people who are on this earth right now. Let's talk about actually teaching critical race theory in schools. Let's talk about closing the racial wealth gap. Let's talk about making sure that we have closing those healthcare disparities, considering there are so many studies that talk about Black neighborhoods having significantly poorer healthcare facilities, staffed by less competent physicians, particularly multicultural competence, higher environmental exposures, and poorer built environments than do white neighborhoods. So let's talk about how to improve the lives of Black people, which would make them and want them to reproduce and bring kids into this world, a healthier world, and a world that respects them and is going to respect their offerings and all of their descendants. Until we do that, we're not going to see that.
Let's talk about Only Vibes podcast.
Yes. The Only Vibes podcast is a Twitter show. I have it on Twitter Spaces. We host it on Sunday nights and Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And we talk about what we want to do is we want to move the needle. Tammy, I love you because I read up on you and I saw that you give a platform for national and local influencers, a local influencer like myself, soon to be national. And I want to talk about that.
Well, you're national now.
We national now. Listen, Miss Tammi Mack show, not on the, you know what I'm saying? Let me say this. Because I don't want to take all of your time. What we do is we like to make sure that we host this show to move the needle on content, because there's a dearth of content for Black and Hispanic, Latinx, particularly most marginalized populations, LGBTQIA populations. And we look at reality TV and they're portraying us. We want to fight and we want to get our bag, and you slept with my man and you this and you that. No. We have substantive things to say about substantive issues. For instance, pro-abortion, abortion versus pro-life versus pro-choice we talked about, or health relationship, personal relationship with God versus organized religion. We talk about it all. So if you want to talk about it, come follow me at Mentally Divine on Twitter.
Marie, please, your African-American conservatives, the mission behind that.
Well, it's to bridge the gap between the Black community and the conservative community, as has been mentioned. I think it was that we are aligned in terms of being very spiritual people. All of the as Brian just mentioned, the Black entrepreneurship. As I mentioned, I'm a little older. When I was growing up in the 70s in San Francisco, I never knew anything other than Black-owned businesses. So getting back to generational wealth, getting back to entrepreneurship, getting back to trades, those sorts of things. I homeschooled all three of my children. So we talk a lot about homeschooling, educational outcomes for the Black community. A lot of our schools are funded through property taxes. And so changing that paradigm so that all of our children have access to better educational outcomes. So we talk about a lot of those issues at AfricanAmericanConservatives.com and how conservative issues are actually aligned with the Black community.
Reverend Walker, what can you tell us about Pro-Life Action Ministries and the National Black Pro-Life?
Yeah, National Black Pro-Life Coalition is like an umbrella organization of many Black pro-lifers, and really it runs the gamut from Democrats through conservatives to liberals to maybe a few leftists. And so that we all kind of agreed, like Feminists for Life, Gays for Life are two organizations where they have their central cause, but they also realize that taking the life of another human being is not going to serve their overall cause or solve the problems. Pro-Life Action Ministries, we've been on the street since the 80s, giving sidewalk counseling, which is just a form of really just giving information and alternatives to women and men not to abort their children. And also my wife and I have Rich and Mercy, which is a post-abortion and post-miscarriage recovery ministry, www.richandmercy.org, and that you can get a hold of us also, 763-560-8383. We've done this in churches. We've done this in drug rehab facilities, also pregnancy health centers and community centers in the Twin Cities. And also we're looking to just be a service and a blessing to those who do regret their abortions, as a lot of people do, and for a lot of different reasons.
Dr. Mestre Dudley, how can we get in contact with you for your services?
Actually, I work for the hospital. I'm a safety officer at the hospital. So I take care of everyone that comes in. I'm no longer in private practice, which is sad, but I still get to counsel all the patients that come through the emergency room and come through my floor. And I get to see wonderful babies being born, but sometimes I do get to see the sad side of it. But you know, just to recap back, I know Ms. Straughter was talking about adoption and so forth, which is so great. And I'm so glad that you did it. And I wish more people would, but there are a lot of people who talk about pro-life, but we still can't even pass the Family Leave Act. Come on, people are not, you're not even allowing women to take some time off to deal with their baby and bond with their baby. So we have a lot more issues to talk about when it comes to Black women and their health. And even though, you know, she might not have a medical issue, it affects her mentally if she cannot take care of her child. And we need to deal with the woman on a whole and not just think of the baby that's inside and possibly might make it. We need to think of the woman who is there.
Thank you, Dr. Mestre Dudley. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Pastor Walker. Thank you, Marie, for being on this show. And we definitely have to have a part 2 because there's a lot to unpack. Stick around because guess who's up next? Vivica, Lisa Ray, Selena, and Claudia. Yep, it's Cocktails with the Queens up next on Fox Soul. And until tomorrow, everybody, I'm Tammi Mack. That's the business of being Black on Fox Soul. It's a blessing to be in your box. Bye, y'all.
Thank you for